Be afraid. Be very afraid. Because things are taking a crucial turn in Alien Earth, Season 1, Episode 6, The Fly, and there will be spoilers. After focusing solely on the events of the Maginot in the previous episode, we're back to the larger story, and we make a return to Neverland. This picks up after the events of Episode 4, where a new xenomorph has been born, and Wendy discovers she's able to speak to it. I find myself in a weird position with this episode. It ended up being one that I've enjoyed the most and really got into, but I also happen to have the most nitpicks with it. I know with Episode 5 there were criticisms of character stupidity and incompetence, which didn't bother me too much and I kind of brush it off, but here in Episode 6, stupidity reigns supreme. You can make certain justifications, sure, like the mental ages of the Lost Boys and the overall way hubris tends to cloud the judgment of the big corporation, but sometimes stupid is as stupid does. In circumstances like this, it all comes with deadly consequences. Our intuitions, as the astute media watchers we are, of course tell us that this is all for the sake of the plot moving forward. Contrivances are aplenty in this episode, but they do seem necessary in setting all of the pieces into place, here at this point specifically, for things to go really, really bad at the research facility, and I'm here for it. The episode opens with Boy Cavalier once again broadcasting his reading of Peter Pan. The passage we hear in this opening relates to Wendy, and the realization that she must grow up, and we can relate that to the Wendy of this story, and the growth that she is experiencing. She has shown an incredible ability to communicate with the aliens. We see her in the lab, speaking to the newly born xenomorph from behind glass. It is now in post-chestburster, pre-adult stage. A nice design, and this is very clearly CGI as opposed to the man-in-the-suit effects we've seen. That makes enough sense because I don't think they'd resort to the Alien 3 days of costuming attempts like we saw when they tried to dress up a little dog to appear as the baby alien. And it was actually reminiscent of that a little bit, of the Bambi Burster design from the third film. It's rare we get a look at the alien in this specific stage, so I like that we're able to see that. Usually we see the chest burster, then maybe a hint of the shed skin, then already it's the full-grown alien. Of course, as far as the original 1979 film is concerned, this was intentional. We see this tiny, snake-like creature come out of John Hurt. They go looking for it, expecting it to remain that same size, then all of a sudden, oh my god, that son of a bitch is huge. That worked absolutely perfectly for the original, but with so many years past and so many sequels, there is a desire to see a little more of what may occur within that growing stage. Alien Romulus, I thought, added to it nicely by including the element of a cocoon adhered to the walls of the ship where it can safely grow into that next phase of the life cycle. Even Alien Covenant offered an interesting surprise. We expect to see that same kind of chestburster emerge from the victim. We even see the silhouette that looks exactly like it, but it turns out to be this embryonic sac, which it discards to reveal this mini-alien. I remember that really taking me off guard at the time, but in retrospect, it was a good surprise. Alien Earth's mini-alien is also somewhat similar to that, but maybe a little more lizard-like. And throughout the episode, each time we see it, we see that it's growing bigger and bigger. This is over the course of no more than a day, maybe a couple of hours at most. Its texture and shading is also a little bit different, maybe due to the fact that it was born from a damaged lung, and that caused some changes. But once again, we have a new xenomorph that stands out uniquely. And once again, I'm fascinated by the fact that Wendy is able to communicate with this creature. And I've even started to wonder, does a bond form any differently with it because of it having developed from her brother's DNA? Could that have any kind of bearing on the connection she makes to it? I'm not sure, and there are still many questions left hanging about these little gab sessions. That does bring me to one of my nitpicks, though. You have this human mind inside a synthetic body, a completely new and supposed next step for humanity, and she happens to have this remarkable gift to communicate with a newly discovered alien species. No other hybrid possesses this ability, and as she was told from the very first episode, Wendy is very, very special. And yet, no one is taking any account of the details of these conversations. I'm sure everything in the lab is being recorded, sure, and Kersh is there along with Wendy's brother to observe these interactions. But I don't know, this is an extremely significant event. Wouldn't you want some real-time data, some translations? I know at this point Boy Cavalier is probably preoccupied because he has the upcoming meeting with Utani, but I would think you'd want to be on the forefront of something like this. I would think this would take the highest of priority. And there's not even really any room to question whether or not she understands the alien at this point. She definitely does, at least to an extent. In a later scene, Wendy talks to her brother about the encounter, and mentions how she's trying to get the pronunciations of the language right. When Hermit mentions that he believes it was a mistake to bring the aliens to the lab, Wendy responds that they didn't ask to come here. Now, is that her opinion, or is that exactly what they told her? And in what context? She even says of her new alien friend that, "I think this one could be good." What exactly led her to believe that? I feel like this is important information, especially considering Wendy seems to be developing a kinship with the alien species and maybe even taking their side over the side of humanity. That could be a problem. This is something that should be monitored closely. We're shown that Wendy visits the alien yet again later, and at that point Kersh definitely isn't there to observe. But obviously she has access to the lab, and maybe this is even encouraged, right? Or maybe her abilities allow her to visit the lab alone and engage in interspecies conversation to her heart's content whenever she wants. While I am bringing all this up as an issue, and things that I want to bring into question, there is also the matter of Kersh. Admittedly, he's letting a lot of questionable things happen in the lab lately, and I'll get to that. But first let's address the Nibs situation. I definitely have some issues with this one. The episode's next scene follows up with what we saw of her in episode 4. Nibs has been suffering through some serious trauma. Her encounter with the T-Ocellus may have also unearthed some repressed past trauma. Actress Lily Newmark made reference to this in an interview as being a possibility that her character had traumatic experiences in the past, and it is actually confirmed in this episode through Arthur and Dame Sylvia. It was actually something they were aware of before they chose her. The claim that she was pregnant was also a concern, but the scientist husband and wife team are confident that with some hard work and some therapy, they can get the poor girl to work through this. Adam Ines doesn't really see this as the ideal solution. His order is to wipe Nibs' memory to before the Lost Boys were sent to the crash site in Prodigy City, and dial back her reactions to stimuli. There are some issues with this. Needless to say, there is an ethical boundary being crossed here. You're not just dealing with a synthetic, but a human inside a synthetic body. Even though, for all intents and purposes, they are Prodigy's property, you could hope these hybrids may at least have an illusion of rights. But Ines isn't all too concerned with any ethical dilemmas. He's also not concerned with Sylvia's warnings that it could alter her identity, her functioning psychology, and that it could potentially make things worse. His orders are his orders, and they're very clear. If at any point I considered the possibility that Ines may be a synthetic himself, I think I've left that behind now, because this feels like a very human thing to do. Arthur objects to this, he refuses, and he's fired on the spot. Ines knows that Dame Sylvia can get the job done, and she seems willing to do so. But what if she refused too? Could someone else do it? Someone there, on that island, available to work within that time frame. Maybe she could have stood up a bit and gained some leverage. But maybe she was just too scared to make a bluff like that, and in her mind, she's still doing things in the hybrid's best interests. She moves forward with the memory erasure, and here's the truly stupid thing. No one apparently felt the need to sit the other hybrids down and give them a little heads up about Nibs. As we've seen with Slightly in the second episode in revealing Wendy's true identity to her brother, it's always a good possibility these kids wouldn't be able to keep a secret anyway, fine, but I don't know, maybe just give them the soft version of things. Hey, your friend Nibs fell and hit her head. She doesn't remember anything. Try not to freak her out. Something. Literally anything. But they do nothing. Ines I can understand. He probably doesn't care, but you would think Dame Sylvia would know better. And what do you know? Wendy visits her in her room, wakes her up, recounts events she has absolutely no memory of, and it freaks her out. Doubtless it wouldn't, so this easy fix Ines arranged is surely going to backfire somewhere down the line, and probably sooner rather than later. Once again, credit has to go to Newmark's performance. I think she plays it just right. You can tell something is going on in her head, but you're not quite sure what, but it can't possibly result in anything good. I'm reaching a point now where I'm thinking back on certain clips we've seen in the trailers that we haven't in the actual show just yet, which are getting fewer and fewer, and there's one with Nibs that actually comes to mind. I'm not going to share it, but if you happen to know what I'm talking about, it could be very bad. With all the faults I'm finding in this particular plotline, I think it can be forgivable if it pays off, and I'm hoping it will. But there is one more issue with this plotline, and I guess really of the show as a whole. We keep hearing of this big presentation with the functioning architects of the Five, a showcase of this incredible breakthrough. It's coming in 3 weeks, and that's a hard deadline. This is the drive behind Ain's pushing so hard to get the results he wants. I'd imagine maybe it's something close to one of those Steve Jobs Apple presentations, giving a sneak peek at upcoming technology with the marvelous boasting and enthusiastic applause. The difference is, the hybrid isn't going to be some universally available off-the-shelf product. So I don't think it would be a publicly broadcast event or anything like that. Probably key members of the Five will be there, maybe some important investors or shareholders, whatever else may exist in this world. But with all they've achieved, what exactly are they planning to showcase? Maybe they'll have a detailed outline of the technology and how this kind of transfer works, maybe not. But seeing as how the identities of these human volunteers have been kept secret, and their families think they're dead, obviously no personal information about their past lives will be shared. I mean, just look how easily Maro was able to track down information about Slightly. So I guess everyone is just going to have to take Prodigy's word that these used to be humans instead of synthetics that think they're human. I mentioned this in my review of episode 4, but it may actually have been beneficial to include the families of the hybrid somewhere in this process. I think something like that would go off well. They could provide the heartwarming testimonials. My child was certain to die. Prodigy allowed their life to continue with this incredible technology. I know my child inside and out, every detail, every mannerism, and this is 100% my child in this new body. I did ask why Prodigy wouldn't want to do this and wouldn't want confirmation from the family that this technology worked, and the best answer I could come up with is that they really don't want to know. It's better to just believe it all worked than risk any doubt that it did not. Yes, Hermit did enter the picture, and Ein specifically assigned him to monitor Wendy to see if he truly believed that his sister was in there, but that was more due to happenstance. Not really an official study, more of an off-the-book curiosity on Ain's part, and judging from his actions in this episode, he wouldn't report back to Cavalier if he got results that weren't to his liking. Even with all that aside, and let's say the presentation would be hugely impressive no matter what, who exactly is this technology for? Right here, right now, at this point in its progress, we know it can only be applied to children, whatever specific cutoff age that may be, and that an adult mind isn't suited for the transfer. How they discovered that may be another story. So this is a very niche type of technology. Really it would only appeal to someone incredibly rich, worth billions, who may have a child that for serious health reasons, or some other reasons, needs or desires a new adult body. But maybe that's thinking about it too innocently. Maybe the idea here is, hey, we can get citizens to sell their kids into slavery, basically. The synthetic body is your property, just as a ship and its equipment would be, and they can sign up for a pittance of a contract and go on missions for literally hundreds of years. This will work better than using normal synthetics or humans for A, B, or C reasons. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe, as I love to say, there's something yet to be revealed that may explain this all clearer. But let's face it, at this point it doesn't look like anybody's going to be making it to that presentation. Fate has other plans, and this particular part of the world Halley has created maybe doesn't need to be thoroughly explained because we're not going to reach any specific conclusion to it anyway. But contrast the uncertainty there, all the missing pieces and questions all brought up, to the next scene in this episode, which wonderfully brings this world to life and shows how it operates. This is the mediation hearing between Cavalier and Utani. A great scene, probably my favorite of the episode. I think I'll always have primary interest in seeing the horrific scenes and the aliens and hoping to learn more about them, but it's something like this that I've been clamoring for as an Alien fan. It's the aspect of the company and the looming presence it has over all the characters in this series that is crucial and what makes it so appealing. That being so, the company has always been in the periphery. We've never seen it as up close as we do here. That's part of what can work so well in presenting an alien story in the form of a television show. You have room for something like this, and with all the great stuff we've seen so far when it comes to the aliens and the horror and the action, it's this small, intimate meeting that has become one of the show's most compelling moments. The problem in this corporately run world is this. A spaceship belonging to one corporation has crashed into the property of another corporation. Who has ownership over this vessel and its contents in this circumstance? This has been the dilemma outlined to us from the very first episode, and we're seeing a good part of the payoff here. In that first episode, it's just a seed that's planted. Ainz and Cavalier only refer to Utani as she. She won't be happy about this. We already know who she is, and to say she's unhappy is an understatement. In the second episode, the conflict becomes clearer during a phone conversation between Utani and Cavalier. In a roundabout way, Utani is asking for permission to bring in a team to retrieve the ship's specimens. She offers compensation for the damage caused by the crash, but we sense this is really her price to get the specimens back. Cavalier refuses, reminding her that if she does that, it will be viewed as a hostile act, and that could cause some serious problems in the eyes of the governing collective known as the Five. By the time we get to the third episode, Kersh makes a nice little argument for Prodigy's case when he's speaking to Maro at the crash site. He says, "This ship, to be clear, is an object, not a location. It's a ball that got hit over the fence into the neighbor's yard. I'm the neighbor, so the ship belongs to me now." A simple but convincing enough way to get the point across. This hearing is arranged under the supervision of the Five, and they have assigned this case to a trusted moderator, Barry McAfee. He will decide the outcome after hearing evidence and arguments from both sides. Cavalier and Utani have agreed that his decision will be legally binding. This is how arbitration goes, as decided by this governing collective of corporations. We have plenty of our own information going into this. Weyland-Yutani had sent this vessel out on a 65-year mission to retrieve these specimens. They include not only the xenomorph XX121, but the 4 other nasty creatures we've been introduced to with this series. For what purpose, we can make our guesses. The medical officer aboard the Maginot, Rahim, seemed to have a good idea of what it was all about, which he expresses in Episode 5. It's power. It's always about power. You've got 5 big corporations that control everything, right? But our guys want to be on top. So, they send us out to collect the most terrifying shit so they can use it to take over. Bringing in these dangerous, undocumented species to Earth would be a big no-no, but as we hear from Utani later in the scene, it was always her intention to bring them to a nearby facility just outside of Earth. Whether this is true or not, I guess we don't know. With the crash having taken place, she could easily outline any intentions that she may have had. We also know from Episode 5 that it was Boy Cavalier who orchestrated this crash. He was aware that Weyland-Yutani attained these species, and he was sent specifications by a mole inside the crew. This mole was bribed to commit sabotage and ensure that the ship crashed into Prodigy territory. It was all going according to his plan, and judging by his behavior, this hearing was also part of it, and accounted for. Utani's argument is clear and fair enough. The USCSS Maginot is Weyland-Yutani property. All data, equipment, personnel, and research materials on board are also the sole property of Weyland-Yutani. Cavalier brings up his counter-argument by presenting a list of hypotheticals, all with the knowledge that he was the one responsible for the crash. According to him, there are many possibilities. Maybe the pilot was drunk, maybe the ship was poorly maintained and it's really a matter of criminal negligence. Maybe it was even an attack. He brings up the thousands of lives lost in the crash that obviously he couldn't possibly care less about. Utani sees this for the threat that it is. Cavalier is beginning to argue in a very over-the-top kind of way, but she maintains her composure. Cavalier moves all about, he's very animated, even crawls on top of the table, while Utani is quite still. Cavalier really is just having a little bit of fun before he gets right to the heart of the matter. The real reason they're both sitting in this room, and that's because of the specimens. He sees no reason not to bring them up. Utani does, and tries to maintain some discretion, at first outright denying the existence of such a cargo. But Cavalier has documents readily at hand to prove otherwise. Now that's a bluff. Compensation for the damage, even the pain and suffering, is the guise for what's truly the deal going on here. How much are you willing to pay for these specimens? The agreement is $20 billion. Utani is pleased enough with this outcome, but Cavalier pulls the trump card. He has to keep these species in quarantine. He cites the established time required by precedent as being 6 weeks, and the moderator agrees, much to Utani's visible displeasure. In a desperate attempt to get Cavalier to immediately release the specimens to her, she offers $50 billion. He doesn't bite, and these proceedings are closed. I've looked at a little bit of the reaction to this episode and to this scene specifically, and there may be some debate as to who came out the winner in this situation. To me, it's clear enough that Cavalier got the one-up on Utani, at least from the perspective of this hearing and from the standpoint of what the Five deems legal and binding. He's already had the specimens for a few days, so who knows what he'll be able to achieve in 6 weeks. They could be worthless to Utani by then. They both know this. He tricked her. He can do whatever he wants now, and from a legal standpoint, he did everything right, was very reasonable, and came out of it $20 billion richer. It may have actually worked in Utani's favor to call Boy K on his bluff and allow him to disclose all of the details regarding the specimens he had. With nothing officially submitted to the record, Cavalier could return anything he wished to Utani and claim that's all that was found in the crash. She is absolutely screwed. But they're both playing dirty anyway, and this hearing really is just for appearance sake. Maro, who is present at the hearing, has very quickly become a right-hand man to Utani. He has plans of his own. His dealings with Slightly might not quite cut it, and he's upfront about this. His suggestion is to destabilize the Neverland research facility, and in the chaos they can run their own exfiltration operation. Utani finds this agreeable, but, as it would turn out, they may not have to do too much destabilizing of their own. Things are getting intense, and this scene is the jumping point. I absolutely loved it. And, oh my god, Samuel Blenkin. What a performance. What a great villain this guy has turned out to be. His smugness in this scene is cranked up to a level I didn't know was possible. Never have I ever wanted to punch a character in the face so badly, and I mean that as a sincere compliment. And there's a cherry on top, a little reunion in the elevator between Kersh and Maro that serves as an endnote. It's such a joy to see these two characters back on screen together, taking their jabs at each other and calmly expressing the true disdain they have for one another. It's not even because of the companies they work for, and where their loyalties lie, but for who and what they are and what they represent. Kersh sees Maro as an abomination, this lukewarm compromise of man and synth. The almost human, self-hating machine, he calls him. There is truth to that, and what Maro may hate within himself he sees precisely in Kersh. He's a toy, an old toy. If he holds any guilt or remorse for the loss of human life he's contributed to, it would not give him a second thought to end the life of a synthetic. Completely meaningless to him. I've also seen some reaction to this moment too. More than a few social media posts have compared this to the diner scene from Heat, that moment where the cop and criminal, Pacino and De Niro, meet for the first time and exchange ideologies. At first I thought that was a little strange of a comparison, but then I thought, yeah, I kind of get it. These are two opposing figures, both are great at what they do, but only one, I think, will be able to come out the best. As much as they hate each other, there is some level of respect. And I think on each side there's a certain level of envy, too. It's another highlight for me. Whenever these two characters are together, even if it's brief, we get something really good. And it's not over. This is building to something. I'll be extremely and bitterly disappointed if we don't get some kind of showdown between the two. Not a cliffhanger teasing for the next season, but at some point within the next 2 episodes, these two have to face off. That's something I really, really want to see. What we're left wondering, though, is how much does Kersh know of what Maro is planning, and how much does that rely on his own plan, whatever that may be? At this point, we have a very clear impression of Maro's motivations, that he wants these specimens, and we know what he's willing to do to get them. Kersh, on the other hand, is a mystery. What is he up to? What is he allowing to happen, and why? As shown in Episode 4, he very quickly becomes aware of Slightly's plan and keeps a close eye on him, but he doesn't intervene. He does confront him, though, in a way, offering some insight into the 3 monkeys on Slightly's bedroom wall. Mizaru sees no evil. Kikuzaro hears no evil. Irizaro speaks no evil. They're figures in Buddhist teaching about avoiding evil thoughts and deeds, but over the years they've come to represent something else. He doesn't get into that modern meaning, but if we can use Oxford reference to confirm, it is now generally used sarcastically against those who, through selfishness or cowardice, choose to ignore some wrongdoing. Kersh, after all, is not stupid, and he wouldn't allow something like this to go on without his knowledge, unless it goes on with his knowledge, and that's what we see play out. By the end of this episode, he is also aware of when Slightly succeeds in finding a host to bring to Maro. He doesn't report this to Cavalier, and assures him that everything's fine. And somehow, that's not the only horrible thing to take place in the lab that day. This episode earns its namesake by finally showing us more of the 5th creature harvested by the Maginot, which is the Fly. This is something that's been teased since just about the very beginning. You may remember that early teaser trailer, when we saw the point of view of the creature making its way through the crashing ship. That would be the Fly. While every other specimen has at least had some kind of moment to stand out, the Fly remained hidden or resigned to the background. Now we get a good look at the creature and its abilities. In a behind-the-scenes short, Noah Hawley explains the Fly and its general attributes. We have a creature called the Fly that, like a fly, digests its food on the outside. So it vomits a kind of acid, then slurps up what's left of you. What's special about this creature is that what it eats on its own planet is metals, alloys, minerals. It's not necessarily a threat to humanity, but if you're a synthetic creature, like the hybrids, now you're a meal. Unfortunately for Isaac, the hybrid formerly known as Toodles, we see this exact scenario play out. Kersh opens up comms with the hybrid boy, requesting for some work in the lab to be done. Nothing too complicated. Feed and water the creatures, check the data from the previous night, and pick the next experiment from the list. Follow the scientific method to the letter. After all, it's a method, not a suggestion, he reminds him. Isaac is thrilled to have this opportunity. He's responsible for this work in the lab, he's trusted to do it alone, and he's surely on his way to becoming a true scientist. Well, the routine feeding soon goes horribly wrong. In a previous review, I mentioned that we hadn't seen all too much of Toodles, and that they were probably saving something big for this character. But not like this. Not like this. It's rough, but it does come with some qualms. I can't fully forgive some truly stupid decision-making in this scene, but I will keep in mind that still underneath it all, this is just a kid, and he's really just trying to play scientist. Hybrid or not, if you left a 9 or 10-year-old alone in a lab full of dangerous creatures, under any other circumstances, surely some bad things would come of it. Here's what happens. Isaac is readying to feed the flies, which is, as mentioned, a diet of metals and minerals. The slot that would be used to safely transfer in the food tray becomes stuck. He pulls at it, and because of his synthetic strength, it's completely broken off of its hinges. At this point, he should have done literally anything else other than what he proceeds to do. He's determined to feed them, so he opens up the containment door, only leaving it open with his foot, in the hopes to quickly leave once he places the food tray inside. The sheep, controlled by the Teocellus, rams its head against the glass in the containment cell next to it. It gives Isaac a jump. His foot is removed from the gap in the door, it closes, and it automatically locks. He has now found himself trapped inside with a species that just so happens to view him as the perfect meal. I have to ask myself, can two things be true at once here? Can I find this to be contrived and kind of a cheap way to get a character in danger, but still react in an engaged way to the tension the scene causes? I guess so, because I did. It is the oldest method in the book, isn't it? You just want to tell a character, don't open that door, or don't go up those stairs, but they do anyway, and you slap your palm against your forehead and still get that cheap little thrill. For some reason, I think it elicits an even better, more intense response when we see and know a character is doing something stupid which leads them to danger than it would if we see them doing everything right and reasonable but end up in danger anyway. Maybe we feel more in control that way. Maybe we feel safer telling ourselves that if we were in that situation, surely we'd do things differently. However, Isaac found himself in this situation. This is where he is now, and it's not good. The fly has shot out of its little mound, made its way to the ceiling, then darts down onto Isaac's arm. He doesn't know how to react, and he doesn't really have much time to react. It promptly sprays out that acidic vomit all over his face. I wish I could have telegraphed the thoughts going on in my mind during this moment. At first I thought, well, maybe it's not too bad. But then it just got worse and worse. The melting of his face continues. You hear the breaking of circuitry. He gurgles and spits up his android blood. Within seconds, he's down on the floor, out of commission. The fly begins its feeding, and another joins in. The vomiting and melting and feeding continues, and they snack from every part of his face that they can find. I'd like to think that Isaac's not beyond saving, but this does look pretty bad. Record scratch, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, how did he get here? I think that's worth considering. Is Kersh somehow responsible for this? It seems like the two generally got along really well, and he may even had a certain kind of favoritism when it came to Toodles. When they were in communications earlier, Kersh asks him if Curly is around, implying that she come to the lab to help him. He lies, saying she isn't, and when she asks if she should come, he says no. But does Kersh know Isaac well enough that he would anticipate that being exactly what he would do? Did Kersh create a situation that would allow this to happen? Did he have something to do with the food slot being stuck, also anticipating reckless behavior in order to get the job done? I'd say it's a possibility. The other possibility is that it's the Teocellus. It's coming to be the all-knowing, all-seeing eye of the lab, the complete antithesis to the three monkeys. It observes Wendy during her conversations with the alien. It looks directly at the flies earlier. It seems quite aware of what happens later on with Slightly and Arthur. How much of what goes on here is orchestrated by this creature? I theorized of the previous episode that the Teocellus may be able to control certain creatures, and somehow aided in the tick escaping from containment in Chapuzzo's lab. If that's the case, could something similar have happened here? For example, could it have guided the flies in somehow emitting maybe just a little bit of the acid vomit onto the inside of the food slot, causing it to get stuck? And if both possibilities can be true, is it possible that Kersh observed this sometime earlier, and took that as the opportunity to call upon Isaac and send him to the lab? Or could it all have just been an unfortunate accident? Anything's possible at this point. This is all just a part of the domino effect that leads us to where we get at the episode's conclusion. Another factor at play here is Hermit. He's seen enough. He knows his sister is never getting off this island of her own free will, if that even is what her free will really desires. She hints otherwise, but he starts planning an escape, and he is just comically transparent about it. He asks Kersh about her battery life and maintenance, of someday leaving and being a family. Again, Kersh is not stupid, but when it comes to Hermit, evil is not seen, heard, or spoken of. But really, Hermit is just plain sloppy. There's no getting around it. He's carelessly conveying this desire to escape to just about anyone, which is extremely foolish. Even those he may consider close friends. He's out on patrol with Siberian and Rashidi, very obviously trying to get some information that may help him get off the island. Gee guys, I really like boats. Do you guys like boats? I wonder if they have any boats around here. Do you think they have any? Are they locked? Do they have enough fuel to get far, far away? Yep, I sure do love boats. I mean, come on. But Siberian cuts right through this. She knows exactly what he's thinking. We got a good thing going here, she tells him. We're alive, we get paid. Don't fuck it up. Of the monsters on the island, she says, if they're here, at least I know where they are. It's refreshing to see a character speak like this. We're dealing with larger-than-life characters with big ideas, but here we have someone who is realistic about who they are and what the situation is. Siberian knows she's not all that special, that she's an expendable asset. She has no illusions otherwise. But she can still keep a steady hand and deal with any problems that may come her way, and she's not willing to cause any kind of disruption that may rock the boat. I think that is important, to have that kind of perspective, so I'm glad they took the opportunity to have a moment like this from a character like this. I could actually see Siberian slowly becoming more important to the overall plot, maybe even growing into a larger role at the end of this season and into the second. Then again, no one's really safe on that island, and while the conversation is cut short, Hermit still wants to move forward with his plans. He even draws up a literal escape plan, physically on paper, for anyone to happen upon, including Slightly, who once again appears in his room with a light step, him and Fog on little cat feet. From episode 4, the idea has been planted that Slightly is choosing Hermit to be his sacrificial lamb offered up to Maro. He's even trying to get Hermit to come along with him to see a special secret, which is not all too effective. As awkward as it is, we still do have some tension and a fear for Hermit's safety. Things would align differently though, and Slightly would find his sacrifice, but not in Hermit. As the episode is drawing to its end, Hermit happens upon Arthur, who is getting ready to leave the island after being fired. Hermit expresses his concerns for Wendy, but Arthur assures him that she is safe. He knows very well, though, that everything is being monitored. He uses text on his computer screen to covertly tell him to take his sister and go, giving him the code for the boat and disabling the hybrid tracking system. No doubt there would be screen recordings of every computer at this facility, but I'm sure something like this wouldn't be as immediately noticeable as something captured by the security cameras, so a good maneuver on Arthur's part. The two shake hands, Hermit thanks him, everything else is unspoken, and he makes his way off. The crucial moment for Arthur occurs immediately after this. He notices something is wrong with Toodle's tracking. It's not giving off a live feed anymore, but his last known location was in the lab. We can see the worry on Arthur's face. We already know he's going to try and find Toodles to see if everything's alright. He has no professional obligation to do this, obviously, since he is no longer in Prodigy's employ, but it's his compassion for this surrogate child of his that inspires this fateful decision. We can think back to Ripley in the first film. Why did she go back for the cat? Even in the second film and going back for Newt. When you have escape and freedom and life right in front of you, right within your grasp, how do you make such a choice? Sometimes it just can't be explained, and it's purely matters of the heart that mute all other instincts. But as I said in my previous review for episode 5, the unfortunate reality is that not everyone can be Ripley, and sometimes you're just dealt a bad hand. As far as Arthur's concerned, it's as bad as it gets. He arrives at the lab and Slightly just happens to be right there with the clock ticking down on his own crucial decisions. He lets the lost boy in, hoping for help, but as Arthur tries to retrieve Toodles, Slightly opens up the cage with the xenomorph eggs and locks the lab from the outside. The parasite emerges from the egg and does what it does, giving Arthur a big hug on the face. Slightly now has his bargaining chip to save his family. He makes his way with Arthur to the vents for escape. Kersh, on the monitor, sees all. And, from behind the glass of its containment, the all-knowing eye sees all. Quite the episode. Overall, I'd say it delivered. I know I spent a lot of time airing out my grievances, but sometimes you just have to do that, and this actually is one of my favorite episodes of the series so far. It It has all the cool alien stuff, the corporate intrigue, the compelling character moments, and a fair amount of tension. I loved all that, but there were just some things that I didn't love quite as much. The thing is, there will always be things you like and dislike about art, and this is art, damn it. To wrap things up, I'll note that it came as a nice surprise within the last week that Sigourney Weaver revealed she's been watching the show. She was at the Toronto International Film Festival speaking to the Los Angeles Times and shares some thoughts on what she's been watching so far. I'll close with some words on Alien Earth from Ripley herself. I think we're fascinated by deep space. I especially love what Noah is doing, this confluence between the greed of the human race and their willingness to naively interact with this other species. I'm enjoying the show so much because it's much broader than the alien itself. It's glorious to think about space and to think about confronting a creature. People, I think, love to be terrified, and there's a fascination about this creature that H.R. Giger created that Ridley really cemented. It has its own magnetism, and all the other awful things that Noah's introducing, his samples into our world, that they're just very nightmarish, and I applaud him. What did you think of Alien Earth Season 1, Episode 6, The Fly? How has the series been shaping up for you overall so far? And what are some predictions of how it all may go down, considering we have just 2 episodes left to go? Comment below and share your thoughts. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching today. Please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe to the channel to keep up with all the latest from Alien Theory. My very special thanks today goes out to Nicholas Budda, our Wayland Utani executive, and Gregory Ford, the Patreon Hive Praetorian. My special thanks also goes out to Ben Katz, the Patreon Hive's queen. As always, a very, very special thanks to Lady Anne in the Ellen Ripley Tier of Excellence. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for further information. You can also follow me on social media. Follow @alien_theory on X, formerly Twitter. Follow @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.